Today I'm joined by the main protagonist from all of your wives, girlfriends, and sweethearts love story books, Fabio himself, Mr. Dash of Garnish and Gains.
Breaking of the idea of the skinny archer.
I
right?
hate that trope.
And so that's just kind of been the overplayed trope, and it's like, all right, it takes strength, but I think people are starting to catch on a little bit.
Someone gets shot by an arrow and they're like, yeah, I'm dead.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not a thing.
Right, yeah. You get sepsis, and then weeks later, you die horribly. Yeah. Which movie or game do you think best has ever replicated what you perceive to be how combat was done?
It's tough. It's a tough one. I really enjoy the POV. You said you did not like my lord's latest garment. Gentlemen, podcasts like this are made possible thanks to sponsors such as Americana Pipe Dream Apparel, fantastic young Zoomers getting after in the military space and arena. I don't know if they have medieval crossbows, but they should have some cool garments to take your wardrobe to the next level. They have awesome knives, they have manuals, they have MREs. Occasionally they'll have night vision, but they are doing the Lord's work when it comes to milsurp. We also have to thank Optics Planet, the optics sponsor of Managerial Outcomes. Sometimes we're in the podcast studio, sometimes we're off the flat range slinging, and Optics Planet wants to hook you up with 7% off the entire store using code LARP. So a big thank you to those guys, and they will get you equipped. My lords and lads, welcome back to the ARMO podcast, a podcast that falls under the tutelage of administrative results, but is now rebelling against the crown. Managerial Outcomes leads the revolt against the corrupt tyrant that is administrative results. Today I'm joined by the main protagonist from all of your wives, girlfriends, and sweethearts love story books, Fabio himself, Mr. Dash of Garnish and Gains. Welcome back to the channel.
Good to be here, man.
Do you like my crossbow?
I do, I do, but I feel you've turned to the dark side, unfortunately. You've gone from the Warbow to the crossbow.
I am still partial to the Warbow, but the crossbow makes sense for logistics.
Which logistics?
Time logistics. If I needed to, it's maybe they cost more to make, but if I need to equip X number of dudes to be missile troops, then I can do that way quicker than with the Warbow.
True. Yeah, it is a cheaper thing to push out. Like like we talked about it, you put a crossbow in someone's hand, they can pretty much do it. But a Warbow, it's like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's so much harder to get good with the bow than it is with the crossbow. I literally picked this thing up and I was like, I'm gonna go shoot it real quick. And I was aiming at the target and I was like, bullseye. It's like, oh, okay.
All right, this checks out.
Yeah, with the Warbow, I'll be shooting. I'm like, ooh, low left, or ooh, high right, low left. I'm like, come on. Like, it does the time it takes to get dialed in with the bow, especially with traditional archery versus just picking that thing up.
Yeah.
If I was, a medieval baron and I was like, all right, I gotta go fight this other baron, guess I'll just hire some crossbowmen.
Yeah.
Or at least, with the militia or just lower tier troops making, I don't know, some level of crossbow. They don't have to be crazy good crossbows, but of course they have their downsides.
Right.
So I like the idea of, because I went with the goat's foot method of drawing the crossbow, which you don't know, it's a lever you hook up to the bow and you can just essentially ratchet it back. There's a few other methods where it's like either just step into the stirrup and using muscle, but those aren't as high of a draw. There's the windlass where you hook it up and it's a crank, but those are for like 1,000+ pounds.
Right.
And they take forever.
Yeah, it's like almost 30 seconds, 45 seconds. If you're trained, I think I saw Todd do it and it took him about 45 seconds. And he wasn't like hustling, but he's familiar with it, obviously. And so I think to actually get it, that's why you need the Pavise, I think it is, where you have that extra shield because you're going to be down and cranking and be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I feel like at most of the battles throughout the 100 Years' War, because that's typically where I think of like the Warbow versus the crossbow. That's where I think it's most interesting because they're going toe to toe.
Yeah.
I'm sure, throughout human history, I'd bet my bottom dollar that traditional bows, or just, long bows, composite bows, whatever bows, have gone against some form of crossbows, all the way over in China or all the way over, in Europe.
Yeah.
But to me, it's always the most interesting for like European warfare. I don't know why. I just find it intrinsically interesting. The problem with like Chinese history, it's like the Qin dynasty, and it's like I don't have a point of reference for this.
I'm
not like well studied in the Chinese. I'm sure it's fascinating. I like the Britons and I like the French fighting. To me, it's like timeless. It's like, this is nice,
I think that the Chinese is interesting because it has a lot of implementation of gunpowder
Yeah.
earlier then, and a lot of their weaponry and things like that would use a form of gunpowder where they would have different things that would be these like mechanized type arrow, launchers that would have gunpowder. It was just like, it was almost like a quicker mixture of both. I feel like it was,
That is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is fun. It's like Xi Jinping tied a bunch of rockets to his chair because he wanted to go to the moon.
Yeah, I remember that
Stuff
story.
like that.
Yeah. It's, yeah.
Okay, Xi Jinping, good luck. Yeah. No, that's definitely a good point. Yeah, I do like the mix of like, it's kind of nerdy, but playing Total War games and you have like your archer units and it's like, all right, bring up the bombard, you're like going at it. With the crossbow, I feel like the problem during the 100 Years' War is they never got a good chance to showcase with like actually using pavises. Like it was always like they show up to the battle and they're like, all right, crossbow, when we get out there, they're like, hey, we need our pavises. These are English longbowmen, right?
Yeah.
And like, nah, you got it. Like, go do your thing.
Yeah, there was a lot of contentment from the French for them, right? So it's like, even when they tried to retreat, they got run down, like in Cressy, and they didn't really take into account like the weather. I know, like it's like you have this gets wet, it's gonna be less useful, but it's like raining hard, and they're like, you'll be fine, don't worry about it, you know? So I do feel like, it had definitely good benefits and could have been great, but in that time frame, I definitely feel like it got shafted because it wasn't really utilized well because they didn't really care for it. The French, it was like, you fight with honor, man at arms, you fight on horseback, the cavalry charge.
If you're a missile troop, what are you, dude?
Yeah, exactly.
You're kind of a big weenie if you're a missile troop. That's like the vibe you get.
Yeah.
At least from like all of, I guess maybe like the historical vibe / mixed with something like the pop culture and movies.
Yeah. I think it's probably tainted with like a lot of pop culture history, but it looks that way just if you look at the...
I remember reading books, I think it was Bernard Cornwell, or was it Cromwell?
I think it's Cornwall.
Yeah. So I remember reading those books, and they're talking about how it's like, the missile troops, of course, are naturally like kind of looked down upon.
Yeah.
Where it's like rare for like an archer to kind of get almost like knighted or become like a Ventanar.
Right.
Like get land or something like that. So I was like a massive spitball to like a catch-all, but I'm sure we could probably break that down more. But no, I think about, because we're doing a video today, like by the time we film, this podcast will probably come out after, because we're going to turn and burn on the video we filmed today.
Sure.
But this is our chance to kind of break down more so and play with the concepts, because you may think like, hey, this is kind of boring, but this podcast is the formula, dude, for us to really just riff on like antiquity weapons.
Yeah, I love it.
So if there's anything, of course, you want to talk about, by all means, cut me off. But I was thinking about this thought, where we often see like the demonstrations, like if we look at Todd Cutler's work with Todd's Workshop, how we were even talking off camera, how it's like when they're doing comparisons, they're using like the max weight stuff they can.
Right.
Which of course, for showbiz, very interesting. But for practicality, I was thinking like, all right, if you take a guy like Joe Gibbs or a guy like you, where it's like, yeah, you can pull a crazy heavy bow, but like for practicality and longevity, would you take that heavy bow if it wasn't like a battle day, Because I would guess, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like archers going on campaign would probably bring a bow or two.
I would imagine that you would need multiple things in your arsenal, multiple strings a lot of times as those snap. I had a few snap on me recently, and that's just like, but I feel like if you're going to war, you go to war with a warbow, right? And it's a more modern construct. I think it was like late or earlier. It wasn't called a warbow in the day, and they kind of established anything over 80 to 100 pounds is considered that. But they had a delineation with hunting bows and bows for war. And so when you're doing war, they would say generally an archer, like they would quantify, they'd have like 42 arrows, like 24 in like a sheath or something like that, and an arrow bag, I mean. And so I'd imagine it was assumed you're probably going to rep out 42 or 48 rather, maybe, in a course of a battle. Yeah. So if I'm doing 48 and it's battle day, I'm going to want the biggest, meanest thing I can do, and I can hit that 48 times, even though it's going to gas you out. But they also
that adrenaline's kind of nice. Yeah, but you should have a little bit of an adrenal dump.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of what the nerds forget. They're like, I don't know if they could actually pull that 48 times. I'm like, hey, dude, if there's a bunch of angry Frenchmen coming at you, and they're trying to stab your gullet, you're gonna pull that freaking bow. Yeah, you know what I mean.
So I've done like an endurance type tests with varying weights. Like like 130, I could get like in like just nonstop, right? And like, I'll probably get 130. I slow down at like 27 or 28. I start to get tired. But it's like, you got to know that that's just me like repping out, trying to get 8 a minute or something like that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that high of a rate of fire when you're staggering your shots.
Because that windup still is so massive.
Yes. And I think that also it wasn't just like an instant, just like bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
It was like you get it, you set, you have different volleys coming as well. And it would come to a point where they're basically loosing at will. But I feel like they could kind of gauge that endurance to where they don't gas out too fast. Because then when you're getting like a less of a draw, you kind of like slow it down. Take a breather and then just go again.
Well, another thing I think about too is like, yeah, you get an adrenaline dump, but those guys were marching for days on end.
Yeah.
A lot of those, depending on the battle, they could, like at Agincourt, they could have like dysentery.
Yeah.
Crapping their brains out.
Literally just no pants.
No
like,
pants.
I'm just going to
could just be starving where they're
Uh-huh.
like, hey, there's no food.
Yeah.
Rained the night before, so they're tired and they're cold and they're wet. You know, it's October.
Yeah.
I think, was it October 25th?
Oh man, I don't
So
remember. Yeah.
It was. I think it was later into October, so it was getting colder.
Yeah.
You know, so that's where I can start to see the fatigue coming in more into it.
Yeah.
Because it's like when we have a good day, like we wake up, get our breakfast, get our coffee, go hit the Warbow reps.
Yeah.
Probably doing a lot better than say some medieval yeoman who's not as physically jacked. I mean, come on. Come on. So.
And I will say this, like there was one time just for my own curiosity, I had like a bit of a stomach bug and I was sick for like 2 days and I was just like, it was all coming out. And I was just like, I wonder like this is the closest I'm going to get to dysentery.
Yeah.
Like I wonder if I like can actually draw something heavy, like the different level of strength. Like I really could not. And that's just another thing that kind of gives you that idea of the adrenaline and the respect for the hardness of people.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that's like you're at your worst day and you're doing crazy battles, and that's just a different level of endurance.
At your worst day, now you have to perform at your highest.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh, there's something to be said there. There's a life lesson for you right there. Yeah.
You heard it here.
That is interesting. So my thought was, what if they ran, like they knew that they could pull higher, so they could bring maybe they brought like their highest pulling bow, whatever that may be. But then they thought like, okay, this is where I have to wind up the most. This is like my most fatiguing. What if I bring like a secondary bow that is much more easier to run, but it's still in that warbow category? Like, how easy would it be for you to run and gun with like a 120-pound bow?
Right. No, yeah. I mean, obviously, it'd be a lot easier.
Yeah.
That's kind of like on that lower end of where it's relatively just like a real easy, quite breezy, and I can aim a lot longer with it. It doesn't start to compress me in a little.
Yeah.
But I would imagine if they're up on the battlefield, because really, like the volleys would go, and then it's like it was not long until they had to engage in the melee too, right? So they, even Bernard Cornwall, Thomas, there's that one fight where like it's I forget which battle it is, but like they start charging, he like throws his bow behind the line, and then he's like go, and they were really instrumental in that melee because once they kind of clashed, like you really couldn't get the arrows off in the same way.
Yeah,
and I feel like they had to be trained well in that. So having a lower draw weight, I don't see the practicality of doing that. It's like you rep out your max.
Well, no,
and then,
where I'm seeing that is not necessarily like battle day.
Okay.
Like battle day, it's like,
sure.
Bring
Okay,
the Warbow.
yeah.
But I'm thinking like, for if you're moving across the countryside, say you're like looking for, food or supplies, you're not expecting to get into an all-out, fight with someone, or maybe you are, but you still need to be maneuverable. Like where the battle line, it's like, all right, you're gonna have your more static lines. You're like for a period of time, you're gonna have more wind-up space because you're gonna be covered by your archer to your left and right. With the lighter bow, my thought process was like, all right, much higher maneuverability, so you can get off shots much quicker. Like you don't have to like stop, set up.
Yeah.
Or you pretty much you're running, hey, whoop,
I think the only problem with that would be you'd have to have different arrows as well.
Yeah.
So it's like if you have a arrow for 150, 60-pound bow, it's going to be 1,600 grains.
Yeah.
If you're walking around with a 100-pound bow, you're going to need 1,900, 800 grain arrow. So you'd have to have an entirely different setup and quiver.
Yeah.
And I feel like, honestly, like we're talking about it like it's it's max threshold because this is like, I didn't start when I was 12, right? And so like I'm able to do that for a certain amount of time, but I feel it would just be like breathing, and I feel like if they would drop it down and go to a much lighter weight with a lighter arrow, those first few shots are going to feel super funky. because they're gonna come off a little differently. Like you kind of have to get used to the bow you have, right? They all operate different ways. The type of wood, how quickly it responds and returns to rest can vary dramatically between wood bows. So I think it's something where it's like you could have another one, but I imagine if you got one made after yours broke, you'd want it to be somewhat similar to the weight because you're basically equipped for that. Like your body's basically drilled into that as like just breathing. Like if you watch those videos of people like on an assembly line, like that have done it their whole life where they just have that muscle memory and repetition. I imagine with the bow, even at that heavy weight, it would be a similar type thing.
That's a good point.
And then they do drop off after time too. So, wooden bows do degrade. You're not going to have the same draw weight as you use it more and more. So they'll get lighter. So maybe they could have an older bow as a trainer, because it's probably not returning to rest as quickly. It's a little bit lighter weight, something like that. But I would probably keep it in the same 5 to 10 pounds so you know what you got and how responsive the wood is when you release it and where it's going to go.
How old were you when you started shooting heavy bows?
Probably I started doing heavier bows like in my 20s. I think I'm 38 now, turning 39 in July. So I've been doing it since then, but it was like on and off, just like anything in life where I'd work with it. But I think I got my first 100-pound bow when I was like 25, something like that. And that's when I was like, all right, this is what I want to work towards. So that's when I really started doing it. And then a few years later that broke and I got 130 pounds, and that's just kind of how it goes. I use them until they break, a lot of times, but you just kind of rep it out and then you start to feel it get a little bit easier as the bow starts to wear down. And then it's like, all right, I'm going to try and jump a little bit more and go up a little higher from there.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. How long did it take you to start getting up in the heavier weights?
So I feel like once I got going from 100 to 130, I feel like was still within that realm of like, all right, I feel good. And then I got like real cocky and got like a 180-pound bow. And I was like, this is like my end game. And I was like, I was feeling strong and I was good. And I even stringing that with a stringer, I couldn't do it. I was like, what? And so I was trying with that 178-pound bow, and I was like, this is insane. So then I got a 155-pound bow, which was a self bow. So it's just straight white sapwood hickory. And it's longer too. So I feel like the longer it tends to load up in the back a little bit more. So with that one there, that's when I started to dial it in a little bit more because I had never had training with it. I just wanted to do it. I'd never had like an archery coach or anything. So when I first started, like for many years, it was just like ripping it back and it wasn't really great form. And then humorously enough, when I started doing videos online, I had a guy from the Netherlands reach out to me who was like a Warbow archer and a bowyer. And he's like, hey man, listen, if you don't mind, I'd love to talk to you about, the form. And I'm like, hey, I'd love it. Right. Cause I have no ego about it, right? There's always someone who knows way more than you.
Always a bigger fish.
Yes. So I feel like in the past 3 years is where I made the most gains because I really sorted out the proper way to do it. Because I would watch like Joe Gibbs online and try to replicate it and everything, but it wasn't really like a coach necessarily. And this guy, like I would kind of FaceTime with him a little bit and he'd kind of walk me through it a little bit more. And that's what really helped me get it locked in. And that's when I got up to 165 and then occasionally the 175, but that depends on the day if I've had pre-workout or, something like that.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
There is something to be said about the humility you acquire after going down the Warbow path.
Yeah.
I was not humble in thinking that I could come into it and like just be like, yeah, of course. I'm not a medieval peasant.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm an American. I eat meat. I got good food. There is nothing in the gym, really, that off the top of my head, unless you know, that can replicate the Warbow pull.
No.
It is quite aggressive. It is so much strength required too. Like I can move weight around. I'm not the strongest dude ever, but I feel pretty confident I can move some weight around.
Yeah.
Like if you told me like, all right, you have to pull a 100-pound bow, I'd be like, easy.
Right.
In reality, that's still pretty tough.
Yeah.
Especially now you have to be accurate, do it over and over and over again. jumping up to 160.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it's really hard to say. Like I was even talking to you about this. Like, is it like an energy cubed kind of thing where it gets just harder and harder, or is it just like a pretty linear? Like, okay, no, it's getting much harder based off this. You know, like you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm definitely not the guy to like reference energy cube because I'm kind of an idiot. But
same here, man. It's like just give me a weapon, I'll learn it. I don't. What the mechanics are, I don't know.
Yeah, I think energy cube may apply to like bows more. I don't know if it applies to the pull because it's like if you increase the certain length, then it increases like the necessary lever or something like. I'm really butchering it. I'm gonna have to back off. Forget I said it.
Okay. Delete.
No. We can keep it. But yeah, dude, it's very humbling because when we filmed our first video,
yes,
I thought I had like 100-pound, 105-pound bow.
Yeah,
because that's what I bought.
Yes.
So then it shows up, I'm shooting it. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's kind of tough. It was kind of tough to string. I was getting acclimated, and then my 106 30-inch pound bow shows up, and I'm like, okay. So I string that thing up, and I'm trying to shoot. And I'm like, this is way harder.
Right.
Way harder than my first bow. So then I'm like, is my first bow like 75 than like 90 pounds?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know when we switched and I pulled it back a little bit, it felt relatively.
I was watching you pull like a kid's bow.
It felt a little light, and I think that I'm not sure. Obviously, based on what was done, you didn't. Unless you measure it, you're not really going to know for sure.
We gotta measure that. Yeah.
But again, it's just a matter of the design of the bow, where it loads too, because some will load up quicker in the front and then let off. It's like obviously there's no let off, but sometimes just the way that it's shaped and how short and tall it is, the shorter of a bow. Like with the recurve that I have 100 and it's probably around 150 pound recurve from MR Tiburon or MR Bows, and that is really weird because it's like it actually that first little motion there to get it past is really hard. Like it feels way different, and it almost feels like as you get it back, it's a little bit easier.
Interesting.
As opposed to the Warbow, you really feel like heavy as it's coming back a little bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's humbling no matter what. Anytime I get a new one that's even 10 pounds more, I'm like, I'm excited. I got this one, and you try to get it, and you're like, good Lord.
It's crazy how the weight just tacks on.
Yeah.
So much more energy. It is like you're really trying to fight through that.
Yeah, and the big thing, and I feel like what takes the brunt of it is my left shoulder and my left arm, because like it's such immense pressure, your body wants to collapse in on itself. To like stay out in that position to me is like real hard. Like that's the one I feel like if I go home and I ice or anything, or I put on like a Bengay because I'm old, like that's where it gets it right there.
I can tell.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Yeah, you're getting old. Yeah, for sure. No, that's. Is there a certain method with you shooting out with that left arm? Are you doing any sort of locking out, or is it just keeping a good bend?
Yeah. So the best advice that I found was, oh no, I forgot his name. But there's an archer. He's an Asiatic archer, and he talked about how you basically want to, when you do it, you want to have your scapula aligned with your shoulder. You don't want to be out here because the body will break into itself. But if you have that strong base in there, it's not going to collapse in as much. So it's basically making sure that your body doesn't collapse when it comes in. And then also it's that matter of, people say like a lot of times I think a common thing is they say, well, yeah, you push and pull with a bow, but that's not how it looks. You can't push and pull. Like that's impossible, right? You think of it like trying to rip something open is extremely hard as opposed to activating the back muscles. And so it's really pushing. The push to me is actually dropping that arm down because it's using it. And the best analogy I've heard is that what that gentleman told me was pretend you're doing a wide grip pull-up.
Yeah.
And so it's activating all of that muscle there. So when you're coming in, that motion downwards is actually pushing it out as well. So it's just getting in that extra little strength there. So you're pushing, but not in the way people think where it's like push and pull.
Yeah.
It's like a dropping into it.
Like the pull is you dropping in while the back muscles, or the push is you dropping in while the back muscles are pulling.
Right.
Yeah. I remember even that day we shot, the craziest thing was my chest muscles were like cooked. I was expecting my back to be cooked.
Right.
And like my bow is way lighter than yours.
Right.
But I could feel like there would be certain points like after filming where it's like the tendons in my chest would kind of like fire off if I flexed a certain way. Yeah, it'd be like, like I could feel them individually.
Right.
I was like, yo, that's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
Just because like the weird motion of like how like maybe I was using too much chest or however I was doing it.
Right.
But my chest was catching some of that workload. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is, and just all the little things. Like I think the neck too, right there, that gets a lot of it. I feel the little twinge in there every now and then, or just sleep wrong, I guess. You know?
That's a good point. It's a really fun workout. Like I'll go to the gym and I'll save a little bit of juice in the tank to come home and then do Warbow reps.
Yeah.
Like that's like it's just like so much goes into it, like of the body. Like it's legit. Like okay, I'll work up to a 105-pound bow or 106-pound bow, knock out some reps, and then I'm like, all right, cool, good for the day. Like it's fun.
Yeah,
it's definitely a fun time.
I agree. Yeah. So I'm excited about this thing though, because I really am curious as we go out. We're gonna do some testing.
Yeah.
And like the comparative for 600 pounds versus 160 pounds. And one thing that's interesting about these, you can see it's like such a short travel distance.
Yes.
You know?
I mean, we probably only got, which is massive, maybe 5-6 inches.
Yeah, I mean, just that's it's unfathomably huge.
For sure, I couldn't resist. Yeah, low-hanging fruit. I mean, not a lot of energy transfer in that short of distance.
Yeah, but I don't know if you guys can even appreciate the steel that's here. Like that is the idea of that steel bending is just mind blowing to me. It's
like when Todd shipped it showed up already strung.
No, yeah, I don't know how you would string it.
Yeah.
Like if it came off, I'd be like, well, I need a new crossbow. Like unless you go to like a mechanic shop, man. Like I don't know how you would get that back in there.
A press or something like that. Yeah. Oh crap, man.
Yeah, dude, I have no idea. And whatever this is, like that is just like a terrifying amount of tension. Because you can never take that string off. No. So, it's just. I
gotta maybe reach out and ask about maintenance. Like,
I don't know. I think beeswax is for, bows, but I don't know if this is entirely different. I'm not real familiar with that.
It is. Crossbows to me, I love the Warbow. Right? Now, I for whatever reason, I don't know about you, but like the romanticization of like missile troops through antiquity.
Right.
For whatever reason, I find it really interesting because as a modern person, the idea of having to like close with and stab people to death is still kind of like foreign concept.
Yes.
On a massive scale. I'm not saying I won't do it if I had to. If anything, it sounds better than getting drone struck by like some teenager with like an FPV drone.
Yeah, very unceremonious.
It sounds way cool, a lot more glorious, a lot more brave. Besides, like, like my body gets disintegrated. But the missile, for whatever reason, missile combat, especially of course during the 100 Years' War, but even going further back, like I know you're big into slings, you're big into the atlatl, big into just javelins and stuff like that. I just find it so freaking interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something to be said, and I think that's the passion that I have for ancient weapons, basically as far back as I can go, like you said, with the sling, with the atlatl, different things like that, is the idea of trying to establish a modicum of mastery to where it would be with someone who was raised on it.
Yeah.
Right? Like the sling especially, to actually get that thing to go in a straight line. Like, and again, everything I do, I just kind of pick up on my own through trial and error. So it's not the best. And then, I'll try and refine it over time. But like just having it overhead and figuring out how to release that and make it go forward took like an incalculable amount of time. Like, I don't know how many times I threw it. Like blisters, I'd have to tape up my fingers because it's jute twine. So it's real, the fibers are not really soft.
Yeah.
And so thinking that at the time too, it's recorded they could outpace the bows at the time.
Oh, for sure.
They could go at 400 meters, right? So 400 meters with like a few, you got like a, 2-inch. They'd use clay, things like that, hardened clay, and then obviously later with the Romans with lead.
Yeah.
It's just like the idea of a man-powered weapon is always really cool to me because it's like, what's the extent of what a human can power? And that's why I think there's that huge allure to like a warbow versus armor because it's like the max capacity of what a human can put out energy-wise in a projectile versus another, versus an armored object.
The max capacity of what a human could wear for armor,
right?
While still being functional.
Yeah, so it's like and the crossbows and everything are really cool, but it kind of takes away that man-powered element in a way to where it's like you winch it, you step on it, what have you, as opposed to something where it's like a sling or an atlatl. It's like literally the motion of your body is going to be controlling it in in a very intricate way, and that's going to be the result of like what's the max you can do. So that's why it's always like those fun thought experiments, right? Like thinking about like even like off track, like Avatar. Like I've tried to crunch the numbers on Avatar. No,
the big Navi bow.
Yeah. Like thinking about it, like
they're like what 12 foot.
Yeah,
people?
12 foot, like probably 4 times stronger than a man. It's like,
do you think their bows are taller than them? Is that the math?
I don't remember how tall. I think it was of a similar height.
Our bows are taller than us.
Yes, yeah. So it's like if they even got like, because there's a curve where it's like diminishing returns for wood, right? On a return, if you get to a certain draw weight, it's not going to do much.
Hey, they have different wood from a different planet.
Right, exactly.
Though. It's kind of like the elven archery, where it's like in Lord of the Rings, where it's like it's raining out, but they're still using their bows.
Right.
Like,
well, because they had a magical hair intertwined in the string or something like that. But it's like, okay, could that punch through like armor, like a bow that would weigh, probably a pound and a half coming out? At what velocity would that be? So it's just like a really random rabbit trail, but it's always
that'd be good video for you to do.
Yeah,
like the math, like I crunch the numbers for the
Navi.
It could be a good series too.
No, I would, because someone actually asked me about that, like, because they use I guess I never see the second one, but they use the atlatl in that one.
Yeah, and
I'm like, oh, dude, that's even a bigger shaft. That's like
maybe like them atlatling Alexander the Great's pikes.
Yeah. Cereses, like those 18-foot things.
Oh my God! Like skewer it.
Just the impact alone, like, would just destroy you.
I love the way like they do wobbles. Like,
They move so much, man. Like, and obviously you can get different rigidity for different things, but that's such a wave in there,
dude. You should do that series. I would watch the heck.
All right. I got it. Yeah, that'd be a fun one. Crunch some numbers on that.
Yeah, you better freaking do it.
All right.
We're gonna hold you to it.
Damn it.
We're gonna hold you to it. Another thing I was thinking about with the crossbow was one thing I like about it is I think it will be much easier to shoot with armor on too, as opposed to a bow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that I've done a lot of testing in different armors for a bow, and I have a brigandine. Which is really common at the time, and that you can move really well, right? It's just overlapping steel plates, so you can be flexible. So I had the brigandine and the gambeson, and that worked well. When I got up to the cuirass, that was a little bit different. You could wear it, and then if I had like shoulder pauldrons, like unless those are like super articulated, it's not going to make sense. But I think a lot of the drawings I've seen in like later 15th, 16th century, the archers that were armored usually have the brigandine, the plate legs, and then they'd have like a padded gambeson over top. But I feel like you could be a heavily armored, like a knight could do it, right? Like if a knight falls off his horse, sees a crossbow, he could wrap that thing up.
That's one thing I like about it is like, okay, you could be a man at arms depending on what you're doing. Like it may not be the all-out pitched battle because like, all right, hey, no, crossbowmen are going to be doing the crossbowman thing. But it's like if you're maneuvering around, like I said, looking for supplies or going through a town, you could be a man at arms with your crossbow. Okay, firing off things, got your goat's foot hooked up, taking cover, shooting. You don't necessarily need to be a dedicated crossbowman.
Right, yeah.
And then when it comes time, you ditch it and you're like, all right, cool, let's go to weapons.
Yeah, dude, you could even be like a space marine, like just like, just like trucking through with all your loaded up, your bolter.
Literally a bolter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That could be a thing, like, all right, maybe countering certain archers. Because, that plate armor, those arrows from the longbowmen have been shown, like, they're not just, like, zipping through, like in the books.
No.
Like in Bernard Cornwell's book, where it's like, they whisper through armor. It's
yeah,
like,
no, yeah.
Hey, dude, it's not a death sabo, my man.
He talked about that a bit. And I'm like, man, I just don't think the data shows that that's something that can be done, like, through my endless testing and then through better testing, like Todd's, where they did it with, like, hardened plate and everything. It's like, it'll wake you up,
it'll
but
definitely. It's not going to knock you over either.
Yeah, it's not going to go through, everything, because especially if you have those layers like the onion.
Yeah, do you think those dudes would have been wearing that armor if it was going through like a death sabo?
Right.
Like, what's the point? I mean, might as well die comfy,
Right, exactly.
Then everyone would be using death sabo rounds.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make any sense.
No,
I don't know where he got that for his book. I think he's trying to romanticize the bow a little bit.
I don't know. He did like I've read the appendices and the different books that he talked about and he referenced and everything. And he had like a little index where he talked about people thought it might have been over embellished, but he felt like they wouldn't have used it as much in that time. But I think the thing that most people miss, and it's not talked about, especially, is the impact on the cavalry because of the horses.
Yeah.
Right? If you take a horse out from under a knight, it's going to remove their efficiency in battle by like 50, 60, 70%, right?
Yeah.
Because they're moving slow. They can't keep that charge. If you get one horse to fall, it's going to cause a pileup on the others. And for a charge to work well, it has to be like knee to knee, elbow to elbow.
Yeah.
And so if you can disrupt that line, they're going to have chaos. It won't be a good, powerful charge. That's where that power comes in. Is it works against soft targets, right? They would state soft targets and hard targets, and I think they even talked about it in one of Bernard's books where there was the Scotsman, and he talked about how you beat the English.
Yeah.
He's like,
that was his big thing. He's
like,
this is how we beat the English.
You meet them on foot, right? You get hard targets, so you get plated and hard targets. You get shields,
big,
and you just
shields.
move in a mass, and you just kind of be this unstoppable steamroller. That's going to be the thing, because it's just not like you said, it's not going to punch through everything.
The French are like, now we'll use our horse knights, and they're like, God, what's the matter with you?
I know.
The column, you can't do that. That makes sense. If I was going to take on English longbowmen, it's like, all right, how would I do it? It's either I would use them like, if I had all my resources, like if I'm playing Total War, it's like, all right, I'm either going to use horse archers, or I'm just going to use a mass, like, you can't really do it in like Total War, but like super heavy armored infantry with big old shields, just slowly boom, boom, moving up. Even if those arrows are going into the shields and you have a little bit of like play off, like they're not going to pierce your arm or your gauntlet.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, a few stray ones will probably get someone through a gap or through the eye or something like that.
Statistically speaking, if you're going against like 5,000 archers,
just put the helmet down, put the head down.
You can almost like maybe testudo it in a way.
Yeah,
but.
So yeah, and again, the thing is that most of the testing that I've done and I see as well, just because it's easier, is it's not lobbed shots.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose some of that power when it's coming down because it's not.
That's a big Hollywood trope.
Yeah. It's not going to be using that same velocity, because when an arrow's coming up and dropping down, you're not going to have the same momentum, because the mass of the arrow is going to reach a point where it's not accelerating anymore, it's falling.
Yeah.
And when it's falling, it's not going to fall at 215 feet per second.
Yeah.
Because that's like the fastest I think I've seen a wood bow get that I can go.
Yeah.
So like 200 feet per second is on the acceleration, but when it's dropping off, it's not going to have that same, if it's a 45-degree arc, it's not going to go through anything. So it's really, but it'll hit, if it hits a horse, it'll go through a horse, right? It'll disrupt it, it'll make it panic.
Yeah.
And that's going to cause the dissension in the lines, break up the charge.
Yeah.
But again, those horses still most of the time met the line, and the archers would have to go back behind a column.
Yeah.
And you'd have to have an armored heavy foot soldier column to kind of keep them safe, because if they just push them back, I think one of the big defeats the French had against the English was they had them backed up against a river, and they couldn't retreat. Right, some of them crossed, and then they would come over, and then it's just scattered.
Just chaos.
Yeah.
Which battle was that?
I don't remember.
Was it later in the 100 Years' War? Because I think there was the battle like in the 1420s that the English started to lose against the French. I think they actually brought cannons to break up the archers.
Right. So I don't remember which one that was, if that was earlier or later. I just remember
everyone remembers the big three.
Yes.
Crécy, Poitiers, Agincourt, where the longbow dominated.
Right. Because that's you're gonna have
because that's the sexy
You light
stuff.
about your victories.
Yeah, everyone's stoked about that.
Yeah, exactly.
No one remembers like the English lost this one. Nah, it's not as interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird how that works. Yeah. For whatever reason, it's like if you like favor one side or the other, you like kind of like, oh, the English are the good guys in this one. It's like really not the case. It's kind of like ambiguous.
Yes.
It's just like Catholics killing Catholics because their king's like, I'm claiming the throne. It's like, all right, time to go die for the king, I guess.
I think the big thing is like when you look at it, you think of the bowman is the everyman.
That's true.
Is the thing that you can most, because most of us are not in that elite prestige status.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's one where it's like you were brought up on it from youth as you're just like a blue collar worker.
Yeah.
And it's like and especially in that time where things were so segregated among class and everything, it's like having that ability to go. Then that's why the samurai outlawed gunpowder, because it would break up the hierarchy. Because samurai at that point, if someone had a gun, they could basically obliterate.
Oh, you're good with a sword? Watch this.
Yeah, boom. Yeah, Indiana Jones it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I feel like there's like that little bit of a lure, because more people can identify with that, where it's like the working class versus the 1% sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do like that idea where it's like it kind of levels the playing field.
Yeah.
Now any yeoman's like, all right, cool, we got full plate armor. Me and my boys are gonna just pepper you with arrows.
Right. And then we just kept going, and it's like, well, who needs armor? And then let's just stand in lines and do
you have this super expensive plate armor? Compelling. Face the palisade.
Yeah. Exactly.
That was a pretty meta joke. The crowd, it's like a playoff of like, oh, compelling, face the wall. It's like one of those. You know?
All right.
Anyway, that's a good point. I like the idea of the crossbow because you can mass equip guys that didn't take years, because it's like your famous thing, and I'm sure I've seen the quote too, but it's like if you want archers, you got to train. They got to start with their grandfathers.
Right. So
it's like, bro, that's a lot of time.
And that's that big thing is like the when you look at the skills that are lost, so to speak, like the slingers, right? That was something. If you look at the Balearic Islands, where it was famous for in Spain. Like there was an idea. The idea was that there was not a lot of wood on that island, so they couldn't make bows, and so they adapted to learn well with the sling. Yeah, and it's like, that's something where they were figured out. It was figured out by the Carthaginians at first, where it's like these people are someone we need on our side, right? And so they brought them in as mercenary troops, and then when the Romans beat the Carthaginians, the Romans were like, "Hey, we need these guys on our side,
sick.
Like be indispensable." But when you have that and you have that constant warfare, you basically eat into your skill pool. And the people that are growing up aren't going to have that skill. So it's almost like every little thing is like that small little microcosm in time where it's like you have a really equipped, skilled personnel, but you extinguish that resource.
Yeah, those guys die.
And then that resource is extinguished. So then you move to a crossbow, then you move to firearms, and then you move to drones, right? Yeah. Like you were saying. So it's like you lose some of that skill that made us great at crazy things, just like an ape with a rock, right?
I can't remember who said it, but it's like if you want to start a war, it's like you need money, and you need more money.
Right.
Like warfare is very economy based.
Yes.
I mean, ancient, and you go back to antiquity, if you have these Balearic slingers, and all they need is like some, what is it made up of, like hemp or what?
Yeah,
like,
hemp, jute twine,
reeds even. That's all it takes,
often.
And then they have the skill to like, it's got to be pennies on the dollar to make these slings.
Right.
And then you're slinging like whatever's around, stones, dedicated to clay, lead. Very economic. Yeah. And then you can kill some dude that's like, I trained years with my sword. And it's like, cool, watch this. Poof, right to the head. Yeah. That's great economy. It's same with a warbow or like with a crossbow. Or with now you get into guns, like you're saying with drones. These drones are taking out tanks.
Right. Yeah. I've seen that footage. Just like that's like $50 million tanks or whatever there are. Those like super tanks, and it's just
DJI.
like there's a $300 drone
or a 3D printed drone. I 3D printed this in my basement. Watch this. It's nuts, dude. Yeah, or like even a javelin, or a javelin's like 80 grand. Yeah. But even then, it's like you're taking out multi-million-dollar equipment.
Yeah. Right.
War is a heck, dude. War is a heck. But it is fascinating.
It's fun to play it in history and in your yard, but I wouldn't want to live in the times. Like, there's
here's a question for you. Would you rather fight in modern warfare, or would you rather fight in ancient warfare?
Like, which war are we talking?
War right now, dude.
War right now?
Anywhere from like World War I to now versus...
Well, there's no way I would be in World War I because there were still gases being used. They had chlorine gas. They had flamethrowers. Like, it was a gnarly time. Like, to be chlorine gassed, like, there's not a lot of ways to go that are terrible. And it's like you get trench foot, you're just hanging out. Like, I think a lot of people had these ideas in World War I because they would like... I think when was John Wayne or World War II, where it's like you had this idea of like this lone hero gunslinging, and it's like really all you're doing is camp. You're bad camping in mud for endless time, and then they blow a whistle and you're just running over barbed wire and mortars. Like,
the cool thing with trench warfare, not the cool thing, but I feel like with trench warfare you can occupy space with a minimal amount of guys. Because I think they would take guys off the line. All right, hey, go rest. 4 days on. Maybe weeks off. You do your time in the trenches. You get rotated out by another unit. Yeah. The nice thing about World War I, you're not getting drone struck. Like, any point in time.
I mean, you're getting artillery shelled.
Right.
Kind of the same difference, I feel
but
like.
At least it's like there's still some like guesswork. Okay, you do the math, you dial on your artillery gun, cool, nonstop artillery shells. That would suck. I'm not saying it doesn't suck.
Yeah, but you're still going over the trench wall. Like, the idea that you're going over the trench wall into a hail of gunfire.
That would suck.
Is just like a crazy thing to wrap your head around. Like, they blow that whistle and you're out. Like,
that to me, I'd be like, I'm gonna go over and like crawl. I'm like, screw you,
Exactly. Yeah. So that sounds horrifying to me. That's crazy. I feel like now, in the modern day, like, war is like it's smaller wars, and everything's so well equipped as far as the way that the bases are built, the way that the supplies are being brought in. Yeah. Like, you're not necessarily like hiking for 12 hours and then camping with no food.
Yeah.
And then over and over, unless like you're in a specialized unit where that's like what you do.
Yeah.
Like most people that are in like a FOB or a COP, like they're going to be supplied a little bit better, you know? And so I think that nowadays it's probably not as terrible because you're just not getting dysentery and hiking and then just dying.
The modern medical setup now is way better.
Yes.
I mean, if you have good surgeons, they have a high chance of like saving you from anything.
Right, from a lot of things, yeah.
Like back in the day, it's like you get a cut, and if it gets infected,
I know, it's like, well, that's that, yeah.
Sorry, dude.
You had a good run, man.
Hey, man, we're just going to kill you real quick.
Yeah.
It's better than dying a slow death. It's like, thank you, I'll be with the gods.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like ancient warfare is like one massive day of stress.
Yeah.
Whereas modern warfare is like the constant, I think it's Dan Carlin even said, like the constant drip of stress.
Right,
and then with big swings, you know?
And I think the other thing that's interesting too, in that you miss a lot of it, and very few movies, I think, get it, is that you have that people are not their endurance is a finite resource.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't this crazy like melee, like where it was just like, well, it's like you would have these lines push and push and push, and then they would be fighting, and then people like the Romans would rotate. Yeah. Right? They'd have like this what was called like a demoralized line that was like 10 back. Yeah. Where it's like people would go back there and you kind of reset mentally. But the idea that you're like 10 rows back and just the people like 10 in front of you are literally killing each other. Yeah. And you're just like, well, gonna be my turn soon. Like, let's shake
here we go again.
Up we go.
Yeah.
So like that idea of the stresses of it is very real, but also the idea of the fatigue isn't really shown well because it's all splingy, slashing, moving,
charging. No one looks like there's none
limitless
of that.
gas tank as opposed to a push, tired, and they break back a little bit. You know, sometimes they disengage and then you engage again.
That people don't. I mean, if you've never been in like any sort of conflict, like I remember even being a cop and like when you first started doing like crazy stuff. The tunnel vision you get, it's like, woo.
Right.
And you're not like seeing the full picture. You're not knowing where your other guys are. It's like really like a very like a stress inoculation. Eventually you get better and better and better to where you're looking around. You're like, okay, what's this guy doing? Hey, can you do this for me? Like in the police world, it was like, all right, hey, if this is your beat, you know, you're like you're like the first guy on the call. It's like you're in control. It doesn't matter who shows up next. They can eventually relieve you of command, like say you're sergeant or lieutenant, depending on the size. But if you show up first, you're in charge, dude. Yeah. So other guys showing up, hey, like say there's an active shooter in the building. Hey, this is what we're doing. I'm here first. You go this way. You go this way. You know, that kind of thing. Or hey, we're gonna push this way. Yeah. Where your stress inoculation gets so good. When you first start off doing any sort of conflict, your stress inoculation probably is so low, even despite like the training you get. Right. Where it's like you just don't have that experience yet. So that adrenal dump, you know, the craziness of the situation, you don't have that built in yet. That's why like those experienced troops are so important.
Right, yeah.
And I mean, if you think about guys like certain armies or certain points where they're like just training and fighting all the time to eventually where they get so good, they have an intuitive feel of how things are going to play out.
It just becomes like breathing. Like anything, like the more time you spend in something, the more normal it becomes. Right. And that's why like in a phalanx, they would have on the ends, they'd have the seasoned warriors, because people would tend to, you know, merge to the right, because everyone covers the person with the shield to their right. So everyone would kind of be like, oh, I'm going to try to stay in the shield. And so you'd have to have seasoned veterans on the sides of it to keep the line from moving, because the line would slowly migrate over time just as a natural human inclination to kind of stay as protected as possible.
Screw this. That's a good point. That's a really good point. Man, dude, that is so cool. You just told me you got back from Greece, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Now, you can't say what you were working on.
I can't say what I was working.
Sign some NDAs.
I did, yes. So this is kind of crazy, and I'll give what I can about it because it's not giving much away. So I do most of my stuff with the bow, and then I do sling as well. And people like to sling, right? And that was kind of cool. I got to share that. And then I had this gentleman reach out to me, and he was like a stunt coordinator. He's like, hey, we're making this movie and we want to train someone with ancient weapons, and we found your stuff and we thought it's really cool. And I was like, hey, cool. Like, you never know what's a scam. It's like Instagram, right? So you never know like who's who. Yeah. And it's like, all right, cool. So I looked the guy up. I'm like, oh, he's legit. And so I talked to him for a little bit of time, and he's like, all right, well, then the director wants to meet with you. And I'm like, okay. So I drove down one day to LA and I met with him, and I brought the sling and I talked to him about the sling and how it works and everything like that. And he's like, all right, cool. Like, well, can you get away? Because the first thing I told the guy was like, hey, listen, this sounds cool, but I have a family and I can't be away for too long. Like, I'm not going to be gone for like, months. I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. And he's like, all right, well, we'll see if we can work something in to get you in there. So then time passes for a little bit. And then I talked to, I think one of the guys who's like an executive producer, because like there's all these different chains and you never know who you're talking to.
When you're dealing with that Hollywood stuff, it's always like the rank structure and like the go, no-go guys.
And so then the guy I talked to was like the brass tacks guy, and he sounded, he's like, hey, and I'm like, sounded, and I'm like, all right. So he's like, well, we can get you, can you be here for 12 days? And I was like, okay. And then I was like, so they're like, well.
Were you like, hold on, let me talk to my boss.
Yeah, honey.
Hey, sweetheart.
And so then they're like, yeah, we'll get you here. We'll put you up. And then we need you to work with this guy for basically 10 days, and train him here. So I was like, babe, can I do it? And she's like, yeah, you definitely should. So I flew out there, and I met like some really cool people. And so it was great because I had a time training with them. I met most of the people I was with was in the stunt crew, because I was in like, they had like a they had the place where all the writers were in one spot, was like a big studio. And then they had an area where the stunt crew was, which was this huge warehouse. And it was really cool because I got there and they were cleaning it out. Like they just got the space. And then like as time went on, you saw it transform, and they built out like these all the mats. And they would basically have all these cardboard boxes where they'd set up what the scene would be. So like there would be like a corridor scene. So they'd like make a corridor and they'd set up with boxes so the stunt crew could run through the performance on what it would look like on the actual set they were doing. And so they were running through that. So I got to watch them all do all that. And then they got, sometimes they set up some pulley stuff, right? So they're setting up some things where some guy was like getting pulled up in the air and all that. And then I just worked with the guy and I just trained him for that time. He's a super good student, like great guy. And I had a wonderful time. It was like, got so good by the end. Like I was shocked by how well they picked it up. Like it was really cool.
That's
and then,
cool.
So just spent a lot of time there. And then, like, on the off days, I just traveled everywhere. I was like, listen, if I'm in Greece and I can't have my family here, I'm going to go literally everywhere I can. So I went to ancient Sparta, and they have this field there, which is like the Spartan stadium field. And I just did like some sprints and workouts there. Just I'm like, it feels right.
Cool.
You know what I
cool,
mean?
Man.
It's like they had the Leonidas statue. I'm like, all right, I got to do a workout. So.
There's something to being like in antiquity like that, doing stuff that maybe the Spartans would have done. Minus some of the weird stuff. Minus some of the true Greek tradition.
Like I was listening to a lot of audiobooks about stuff just as a refresher. I'm like, oh yeah, it's kind of weird. But no, I did that, and then I went to the ruins, and the ruins in Sparta are unfortunately very sparse. I mean, they went downhill. They had a small golden window, and there was like, early on, they never actually built city walls because they basically said that our men are our fortifications. So, and you can see it there too, it's a very well built, dug in spot to where there's mountains on the sides, and like to actually get there would be a logistical nightmare. Like they were pretty well positioned for defense. But then as they lost over time, they had to build some fortifications, but never didn't have an Acropolis like Athens did, where it was that huge city on a hill. But it was a really cool site. But yeah, in the 18th century, like a French guy came in and took all the ruins he could, and whatever he couldn't, he basically destroyed. So unfortunately, it's just like a shadow of its former self, And then I went to Delphi, which is
did you speak to the oracles?
I tried, I tried, but
they just weren't there anymore.
I shaved my head, paint myself white, and I'm like, I'm coming. But no, that was really cool. Because that's extremely well preserved, and the history there is just all the different things where you see what was or could have been the Temple of Apollo, right? And it's just this massive structure, and it's a drive to get up there. Like you are going up. It's like a high spot, and to think of people actually getting the materials and carving out to make that, I can't imagine that being done with just actual manpower.
Hey, to be fair, they got nothing else going on.
That's true. Yeah.
There's no TikTok to time that. It's like all you have back in the day is like getting drunk, having sex, farm your field, or build stuff. It's like what else? Go to war.
Yeah. So that was cool. And then I went to the Temple of Poseidon out there by the Aegean Sea, and you can kind of see why they put it there, because each of the temples kind of had a reasoning. So that was like in one of the major trade routes, the Temple of Poseidon, where the sea trade went, where the Aegean connected to certain different routes. And so that was there as like, you pray to Poseidon for success in what you're doing or your journeys. And then just a lot of exploration, a lot of mosquitoes. I did not expect that. Like one day I went out to marathon and I was super excited because I want to do something about marathon and like do some running or something like that. And I got there and I had shorts on and I got on the beachfront and I looked down and there's like probably 50, 60 mosquitoes. And I was like, what is happening? And I like ran to my car and I was like, I wanted to film something here and I tried to. And I had a sling with me because I was like, oh, it'll be cool. And I was like slapping him with the sling. And by the time I get to the car, I had like 30 bites and I was just miserable the whole way back. It's like an hour drive and I was trying not to itch.
So you lost the second battle marathon.
I did, yes.
The mosquitoes were the
Yes,
true
they
champions.
defeated me, yes. And yeah, it's nuts. And the other thing that was interesting is just I was there and it wasn't like the summer season, but it's very humid. And thinking about like, because when I went to the museum at Delphi, they had some of the armor there, and you could see the brass how thick it was, right? Like how thick the plate was. Because bronze. Sorry, you could see how thick the bronze was, and so bronze itself is not like as strong or steel or really strong hardened iron. So it has to be really thick to work, but it has to be really heavy. And looking at the weight, as you think about like when you're doing battle, like in a phalanx, and you have all that armor on and everything, and you're that close to someone, the body temperature and the heat just must be immense, right? Just that idea that like you're in this humid, hot climate and you're bunched up as close as humans possibly can be. And seeing how thick that armor actually was historically is like, geez, that is some heavy duty, hot stuff. It's going to be miserable.
It's not fun.
No, yeah.
No, dude. I mean, I've done filming out here in the desert during the peak of summer, and it's like I'm wearing full kit, like modern gear, and it's like, oh, this sucks, dude.
Yeah.
Like hottest part of the day. Cameras are like, hey, we're getting overheated, got to cool down.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine like if you're going on crusades to the Middle East, or if you're like fighting in this humid, like whatever, it's either Europe or Greece and the Balkans like that. Oh God, that would suck, man.
Yeah, that's again, it's just those levels of adaptability that humans can go through, ancient and modern, right? Like obviously the people that we have now that are trained to handle those weights over time, just walking with heavy weapons and items and ordnance. It's like, it's crazy what people can be adapted to.
Sure. And that's all they know. They don't have like the luxury that we have of like, ooh, it's hot outside, stepping into some AC.
Right.
None of that, dude. I'm sure they have ways to cool off, but it's not like we got. They just can't hop in the car and be like, ooh, mosquitoes bit me up. Let me drive away. It's like they're getting lit up by mosquitoes their entire march back.
Yeah, exactly.
That would suck. There's something to be said about going through and experiencing history like that firsthand.
Yeah.
Because it's like you read about it, and like maybe you sit in school or in classrooms and like, all right, and 536, the Persians or like in the X number of years.
Yeah.
And it's like the invasion. You just don't get a grasp for like the human element.
Yes.
And we're so far removed from that. And when you get the chance to like experience just a little sliver of history firsthand, I think it gives you so much more of an appreciation because it's so cool. Like history is so much context. It's like you think of people today where it's like you see street interviews, or even my wife who's like, she's not very historically inclined. I was like grilling her on history questions, and I'm not like an expert either, but like she has a very bad grasp of like at least military history. Yeah. It's like even going back to World War II, it's like, why should you care about World War II being a modern person? Even I say modern, but like, cause it's all modern. Yeah. It's like, it's a lot of that's contextual to why you exist right now.
Right.
Like why you exist right now is contextual. Go back, all right, what my dad doing? All right, what was his dad doing? What was his dad doing?
Right.
How did we end up here in this spot, now? Like it's so much context that people I think just don't care about. And it's like, hey man, there's a reason why, hey, this country exists, or this border, or like why this geopolitical conflict is happening.
Yeah.
And it kind of important stuff to know.
Yeah. And I think one of the cool things you kind of see too about a lot of ancient history, I think strategically, is like it's very rock, paper, scissors, right? Like you think about now where obviously if we have two equally matched sides, they're going to be using similar type weapons and tactics.
Sure. Think like the Roman civil wars.
Right, exactly. It's like boom, boom. But back in the day where you had like, let's call it a tradesman of the sling, and then a tradesman of, they were trained in like the phalanx. Like you have this very true idea of units that would trained in a specific way and utilized in battlefield in like horse archers. You get the horse archers in, and it's like, all right, we're going to use this to counter this, and then this guy's going to counter this, and you kind of see those pieces moving, and you kind of appreciate the generals at that time who were able to make it work really well, and be like, all right, we have this guy here, and they have this here, so we're going to use our rock and big. It's like a very true reflection of just those different kind of skills used, because then later on, even in like the Napoleonic Wars and things where you had similar weapons on sides, but different tactics. But the weapons were very similar a lot of times, as opposed to they have one weapon and we specialize in this weapon and we see how they mesh up.
I feel like a lot of times too in ancient history, it's like when those battles happen, it's like they show up and like, oh God, oh crap. It's like, what, sir? It's like, oh, they're on a hill. It's like, that's like,
I know.
Game over, dude. They got the high ground.
I know.
Yeah.
I quit.
Yeah. It's like, good luck. It's even like a slight slope up. You're like, oh, crap.
Or even like attacking when the sun was in a certain part, so you couldn't see, right? Like those are things you just don't think about, right? But if you ever are out and sometimes you try to look into something and like the sun's on the horizon, it's like, man, that would change the battle dramatically. You really wouldn't be able to see what's going on. And then even weather conditions. Yeah. Like the idea of the mud, right? Like I've never been in like clay mud in armor, but I can imagine it's one of the worst things in the world, Yeah. Like even doing like a nasty, like doing a big hike sometimes, like where you all out gravel and you have a backpack, like it's just terrible. And it's like, all right, I got to do this and then try not to die when someone's shooting an arrow at me or something.
All right, there's a mass amount of dudes on top of that hill. They are armed to the teeth with arms and armor. And then on your way up, you're getting pelted by their skirmishers.
Right.
It's like, crap.
Really? Yeah, exactly.
Now you have to stay cohesive with all your guys trudging up or going through or doing whatever. Yeah. Hoping no one breaks. Because you may be brave. You may be like, you know what? I'll die today. Yeah. I have made my peace with the gods or with God. And then your boys to the left, your right are like, no, I'm out. And then it's like, well, there goes the entire operation. Yeah, we're cooked. Then you break, and they're like, all right, cool, cavalry, go run them down.
I know, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is, like, I think 80% of the casualties after the break, right? It was something like that. Yeah, after the rout. Like, after they broke formation, that's when people were just killed en masse. Yeah. Because in actual, like, when they're bouncing against each other, like, you get a few spear pokes here and there, but it's really hard to actually get, like, a fatal blow in there. But once you rout someone and they flee, that's when it all happens. And so, like, when there's a statistic that's like 80% would happen after that. That's where all the mass casualties happen because people would break. And then like even like the phalanx, like later period with the Cereces, like when they would break, like supposedly like with the Greeks, there was some sort of code of ethic where like they lifted up the spear and fled like you weren't supposed to kill them. But then like when they fought the Romans was like, I don't know. I haven't heard about that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There's something I wish I could do. And I wish there was like a way to truly know how those battles were fought. I think when I die, I'm going to go before God. He's going to be like, all right, hey, dude, good. Like, you know.
You did fine.
You
made it. You made it here.
Okay.
Yeah, you
I
made
saw
it.
the podcast. Not that great.
Yeah, not that great.
I'm going to be like, hey, G-Man, can I see, can you play back battles for me throughout history? Can I go watch that tape? Like, that's what I'm going to ask. Like, hey, big wish, big fan, can I go watch ancient battles? Yeah. Or can I go watch historical battles? I want to see, like, the tiger tanks at the Battle of Kursk or something like that. Right. Like, I want to see the cool, like, chapters in history. Yeah. And just go watch it back like a Netflix show. Like, that's ideally what I'm going to ask.
Yeah. I think it'd be pretty gnarly. I think
it's my afterlife. I get to ask. Yeah.
A lot of screaming, a lot of fluids. Like I can't I imagine like just the bodies piling up on themselves like as the lines converge. It would just be a messy endeavor.
People just don't die instantly when they get stabbed.
No, exactly. Like people can hang on for quite a while, and you can imagine that you're like fatally wounded and people are just stepping on you. Yeah. Like, again, it's fun. Like I love history, but I would never want to fight in those battles. Like I would be an archer. And then if like we routed, I would run away and they killed me, they got me. But I like in the actual melee, like that's just savage.
Yeah. No, thanks. There was a trauma surgeon that was like talking about how like movies are ruined for him because he'll like watch it and it's like someone gets shot by an arrow, it's like in the stomach and they're like, yeah, I'm dead.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not a thing.
Right, yeah. You get sepsis and then weeks later you die horribly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like one arrow is just not like a fatal death or it's like, oh no, I'm dead. Yeah. Unless, you don't poke someone, they're like, ah.
Yeah. Even the slashes, that's the worst thing. That's like the most egregious things in movies is like the slashes that'll bring someone down. They're like, oh, and then they die. It's like, yeah, it would hurt, but you have bone, you have protection. Like even the gladiators, like just jumping back and forth between time here.
Sure.
But
Keep up.
It's theorized that the gladiators, they would eat, like the gladiator had a lot of bean and fatty and high calorically dense things in there. So gladiators actually were larger. They would have extra fat. And that was basically as a natural armor against cuts.
Interesting.
So literally it's like they would want excess body mass because it would protect against a blade. Yeah. And people, you know,
you're going to be in bad shape.
I know. Yeah, seriously. Yeah. It's not going to be
that
Spartacus.
Chiseled physique is not working in your favor.
Yeah, exactly. Or if like run out of food, I'll die in a week or something.
It's game over for you. Dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is an aspect of natural armor, and I think people are not obviously we're pretty frail, but even like the ribs, and I think that's one thing that people miss a lot of in testing.
Yeah.
But you know, unless you have a ballistic dummy that has good thing, if it's just like an armor test or like a chainmail test or anything, it'll go through, but it's like it might get stopped on a rib.
Yeah.
You know, there's not things aren't just gonna blow through, bone necessarily.
No. The death save was not really like a real thing.
Right. You die slowly. It'd be nice if,
God, that would suck so bad.
Mm-hmm. No,
that's like the worst thing about ancient warfare. It's like, all right, you get a poke, and then you're eventually gonna die.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the next day, I don't feel so hot, and then I feel worse, and then my arm's green. What's happening?
Bad news bears. We have to pee on your arm. We're gonna see if it works.
Yeah, like, I got leeches.
Oh.
Leeches.
Get the bad blood out.
I need blood. I need the blood.
Ah, crap. Yeah, that's a good point, dude. I remember seeing like just stab wounds and either show us photos or even going to calls where people were stabbed. And it's like, they're still fine. They're like, ooh, like they're in pain, but it's not like they're instantly dead.
Right.
And it's like, you can survive a lot of pokes. Just because you're getting stabbed doesn't mean you're going to die instantly.
Yeah, and that's why I think that the worst thing would have been like those blunt type weapons.
God.
Like, because when I did the sling against the skull, or just like with like a mace or something like that.
Yeah.
Like the amount of fractures that occur is just like, and this kind of got like a morbid podcast. I don't know if this is
this is perfect. Yeah.
All right, okay. But like when it hit the skull, like the orbital bone and all the way back, there's probably like 40 breaks in the ballistic dummy. And it's like, that's reconstructive surgery. And if it's ancient warfare and you get hit, there's no reconstructive surgery. Yeah. You just have bone matter. Just like, it's just a horrible thing. Like those blunt damages, because that's not going to kill you outright either, right? Like at least for the poke, you have it might hit your heart or something like that. But
might bleed out eventually.
Yeah, but like with those big, those dramatic breaks, like caving in a breastplate like Robert,
Yeah, God's eye was strong then. Yeah.
It's just like that. Whoa, all the ribs are gone.
Dude, that's a good point. I think if I had to choose a weapons, like I of course want to be like a warbowman, but if I was gonna be like a plate armored knight, I'd be like, give me the claw hammer, dude.
Yeah, like a war hammer, something like that.
Something with a pokey, a hammer, and like I think it's a claw hammer kind of thing. I forget the name. It's not a halberd. It's like the it's where it has like the hammer, the small hammer, the
poleaxe.
I think it would be a more.
A poleaxe.
And it has like a sharp, stabby point on the end. Great terminology, sharp, stabby.
Point. Yeah. That's most weapons.
What does that describe?
Stabby.
All of weapons throughout human
exactly.
history. Yeah. I would just walk up there, bang, you're essentially just peeling crabs,
Yeah, but I think the problem with just that is like if you get shoulder to shoulder, like you're pretty useless. Like I think those two-handed weapons, like when you get bunched up, I think that's like why the single-handed war hammers or maces were so great.
Yeah.
Because it really could be used in tight, close quarters. And like if you get into that full mesh where people are bumping into each other and you can't move, like if you don't have good movement to actually do something with, like really it's going to just be the stabbing.
Yeah,
it's going to be the
stab formation. That's where the Romans had it pretty dialed in.
Short sword.
I don't think I would touch a sword unless I get to like the 16 or 1500s where they have like the rapiers.
Yeah.
I wouldn't touch. because then no one really has armor. Or if they do, it's like they're wearing a cuirass.
Yeah.
A little bit of armor. They can kind of like to the face. With a rapier. Like, a little bit more wieldy.
Right.
Like those big medieval swords were like, whoa, like a claymore. Dude.
Yeah.
I mean, like everyone's wearing plate armor. What are you gonna do against that?
Yeah, just blunt just knock them out. I guess
But Hollywood loves the sword. Everyone loves a good sword. You feel cool when you have a sword.
And I mean, a lot of that's the Arthurian legend, right? Like that very romanticized. It's like the weapon of, because it was such like an expensive thing and such a novelty in the early times to have a well-made forged sword. that it just kind of carries that aesthetic with it that every protagonist has
you are the
with
man
a sword,
in charge.
But like it'd be so cool if they had a protagonist in a movie like Aragorn with like a poleaxe or something like that, like something that was a little more versatile for the time, where it's like you're killing orcs not just with a sword, but you're actually bashing, poking, thrusting, everything. Because there's a lot of really cool stuff that I think was spears are the king of weapon, right? That was one of the first weapons and it carried on all the way into gunpowder era, And it's just like, it just doesn't look as cool. It doesn't have that aesthetic or that feel.
No, dude. The one thing I hate, I do hate the Battle of Agincourt and the King, but they did give King Henry V, Timothy Chalamet's character. He didn't really use a sword, I think, as much.
Yeah, no, I think he had
he eventually went to it.
I think he had a warhammer.
Yeah, I think he had a warhammer.
Yeah, in the intro scene, he had a sword, but that makes sense. Like if you have like royalty in a duel, it would make sense they would use a sword because that would be the knightly thing, most of the time. But, even there, I think that they did a decent job in that duel, too, that first one. Yeah. Because they had a lot of close grip movements. It was a lot of grappling. And I think
the lack of banners and color.
Yeah, I could see that.
Like, because when the knights were clashing, like, no one had, like, their coat of arms.
Yeah.
So you're like, who's who?
Yeah.
Like once they started fighting, it's like, how do you know you're not fighting another Englishman?
Right, yeah, that's true.
Like, no one had
Yeah, they were just all polished and shiny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, it's a very Hollywood-esque thing to do.
Yes,
it makes me so mad, dude.
I think my biggest gripe is, and it's not shown much, but in the time was the idea of grappling in combat. Where it's like you close the distance really fast, and you see that in like the armored combat. I think Buhurt. I don't know the right way to say it, but where it's like full armored combat. They lock up almost instantly because they both swing and that momentum carries them in, and then it's instantly into a clinch. Yeah, and it's down. They try to take him down. I think the last duel or whatever. I think it had some good grappling, but it's like really the killer was going to be that short dagger. Yeah, that's going to be the stiletto or anything like that. Is going to be the one because you're going to go to ground relatively quickly. There's not going to be a lot of time to pull off flashy moves, especially in plate armor, because nothing's going to really penetrate through you. Unless somehow you sneak up and get a full swing, you're gonna come in close. And there's a lot of really good manuals, and the German style ringing and kampfringing was like the martial arts of wrestling. And they had combat, they had war wrestling, and then recreational wrestling. So the idea that there was a plate armor type wrestling.
Yeah, you're not just swinging away. There's more fighting that goes into it.
And then like locking up and using the leverage of the weapon.
There's knights on the ground pulling guard like in BJJ.
Yeah, exactly.
Come into my guard,
I probably wouldn't want to pull guard because like you're not going for joint locks. Yeah. Like it's just like
that's a joke. That's a joke.
Yeah. Butt scoot.
Yeah. Hey, you're trying like they're like butt scooting on the battlefield.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I think that's something that I think is missed a lot. Yeah. And I think in a lot of things like there's that hyper fixation on the fencing. Yeah. And I think that it's really missing some stuff because you could have some like cool John Wick-esque medieval battles if you had some kind of hip throws or just any sort of decent leg takedowns and stuff. And in the King, they had some decent takedown. They got to ground pretty quickly. And I think that's the more realistic thing. It's just again, it's not as flashy as a spinny swordsman. No. It's the whole
that's the classic Star Wars lightsaber. Everyone loves a good sword fight.
Right.
I loved in the last duel the scene where Matt Damon's he's in I think in Scotland fighting along the Scots. And then like the archer's arrows are coming in. Yeah. Like, that was a sick scene.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
A lot of the movie was not historically accurate with like the half face armor kind of thing.
Right.
I was like, all right, whatever. But like that scene alone, I was like, that was pretty sick.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it did a good amount right. And I think there's more movies I think that do. I think the original Excalibur had some decent fighting too with like the heavier type swords and the movements.
Was Patrick Stewart in that one?
No, I don't think he was. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time. I just remember the fights. I don't remember anything else.
Yeah.
But again, like the idea that like you're gonna clench up relatively quickly using the back of the sword for a murder strike or something like that, murder stroke. So just like using the whole implementation of it and not just the edge or the point, right? You use it as a point of leverage and a point of this. And obviously, if you have a rapier in your fencing, it's like just like whoa, you're in and out super quick.
You're probably not wearing
you don't
as
have
much
armor. You're like no armor, right? Especially the hand would be exposed because they didn't like unless they wore a gauntlet, like they stab the hand a lot. Yeah. But I think that would be a really cool thing to see would just be stylized combat armor in plate where they're just like going down, doing takedowns and everything like that.
Dude, one of my newest fascinations of history, because I had a big point, or like a big run with, the 100 Years War.
Yeah.
And then my brother got me on to the Spanish conquest of the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
Really fascinating stuff there, where it's like the New World tech meeting like essentially, anywhere from stone to bronze age technology. Mm-hmm. Like that's a really fun topic.
Yeah.
It's always like, oh, the Spanish are the colonizers. I don't care about any of that. Like the point of battles where it's like you have these dudes in plate armor with Toledo steel, going against these people that have like obsidian rocks for weapons. Mm-hmm. Like that must have been pretty freaking sick. Like those guys, those soldiers that came from like Europe, where they're like toe to toe with other European factions. All of a sudden are like, Space Marines.
Yeah.
Or they're just hacking away using their guns or using their crossbows, or you have the conquistadors on horseback. Like they must have felt so freaking cool.
Yeah, no, I mean definitely the idea of it is interesting, and the bigger thing is like, they were able to run over so quickly just because the Aztecs at the time were so hated.
Yeah. I mean, there's, of course, a lot of factors, like using the other nations around. Like, it's not just like the conquistadors.
Yeah, because, in that time, the Aztecs, they were the power, but they would basically, every year, they'd sacrifice so many people that they would have yearly wars. And the wars they would do were not wars to kill. It was a farming war where they would have weapons that were made to basically hurt someone so they could bring them back and sacrifice them.
I think that was the thing that would happen. Like even if they dismounted a conquistador, they were trying to capture him for a human sacrifice. Right. So then his buddies would show up and like free him, and then he'd get back in the fight.
Right.
He'd get overwhelmed by people who are trying to capture you, not trying to kill you.
But I think if they had they got basically all the neighboring empires, or what you would call them, they all joined their cause. So they had like 200,000 or something crazy on their side. And so that's like, don't sacrifice your neighbors, because
good human sacrifices are going to stop.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to be reasonable with your human sacrifice. You can't go overboard.
Yeah, exactly. Keep it to a couple. I think it's estimated like something like 10,000 or 20,000 a year. It was some large number. Obviously, the estimations are hard, but even like the accounts that the conquistadors wrote were just like, man, this is a crazy culture that really was like, all right, we did. Your neighbors hated you, so that kind of worked against you.
Those guys must have felt so dumb when the human sacrifices stopped and the sun was still coming up every day. Crap, dude. Yeah.
What? Wait a second.
The rain still comes even if we don't sacrifice people? Yeah. No, dude.
Yeah, humans just look for connection correlation everywhere.
I know,
Someone one time probably sacrificed someone and the rain came. They're like, hey, the correlative, that's the proof. We got it right there.
You guys, if we start sacrificing people, now look from a business standpoint. All right, so last quarter we sacrificed 25 people. If we double our profit projection margins over here to 50 people, I'm thinking the rain will come even more and the crops will grow mysteriously even better.
Just picture this big table and they have like a flow chart up there, and
we sacrificed the coaxial people over here. Now, if we take the charts over here, we can really see that our projection and quarterly margins. Todd, do you have the latest projections if we sacrifice these people from this region? Yeah, it's like, what the dude? Yeah, typically when people start doing human sacrifice, I feel like their civilizations like on the fast track to just getting obliterated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it was practiced by a lot of cultures because a lot of people were just trying. When you're like, we take for granted now the knowledge that we have.
Sure.
Right? Like, if you just sit there sometimes and look out at the stars and just try to clear your mind, it's like, dude, what is even happening in life? Like, if you don't have any perspective of the actual fundamental nature of the universe, it's really hard to get your head wrapped around it. Obviously, they learned a lot. They understood weather patterns, seasons. They could track the stars. But it was from such a small, there was so little that was known as like factual data that it's like you really just had to try to figure it out. And the human mind really does tend to try to pick up patterns in certain things. Yeah. The clouds look a certain way, this looks a certain way. So we're trying to make sense of things and just trying to do the best we can. So it's like, all right, well, if I suffer because I'm hungry because I want this, then that means suffering can appease the gods because of this or this. It's just people trying to figure out what works, Yeah. It's just hard. It's fast and loose. And
different trial and error back in the day. Yeah. One thing I don't like is when people look back at the ancients, they're like, oh, they must have been dumb.
Right. Yeah.
It's It's like, no, hey, they're still the same people as us now.
Right, exactly. It's just flopping yourself into a situation where you don't know a lot and you're trying to make it work.
Yeah.
And so people have always just tried to make it work. And so it's like, this works for me and then my family, and then that they get wiped out. It's like, well, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And then we'll kind of track back to something else.
I mean, to be fair, now we have the existential dread rectangles where we can look up the almost boundless information of human knowledge.
Yeah.
What do most people use it for?
TikTok, Facebook, social media.
What? No. What do most people use the internet for?
I don't know.
Looking up boobies.
Oh, you.
You telling me I know I'm reaching here, but I mean, even now it's like people like to think they're so smart, but it's like they get the infinite access to technology. They're like, I can look up sex on this thing.
Yeah, that's mankind's one of the oldest drive, right?
Yeah.
Like we've still are running around with.
You're telling me there's some hot ladies over in with the Mayans or the Aztecs, and all I have to do is just go kill their dudes.
Yeah.
And there's gold.
Yeah,
all right, sign
I'm
me
there.
up.
Yeah,
Dude.
exactly.
Sign me up. Yeah. That's a big driving factor, is stealing people's stuff and taking their women.
Yeah,
that's most of human history.
Yeah. What is it? Genghis Khan had how many kids supposedly? Something like
kind of a huge descent.
Yeah,
from Genghis
basically
Khan.
most of the gene pool there has some of his DNA.
That's got to take a lot of work, like daily. Like, all right, what's the next batch of concubines? All right, roll them through like convoy style.
Yeah.
Make sure you're getting your vitamins, I guess.
Oh my god.
You can't say that. That's inappropriate. No. You can't say that.
So the next thing, let's see here. Which movie or game do you think best has ever replicated what you perceive to be how combat was done?
That's tough. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Are you talking about from like the antiquity?
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything that's like, okay, I thought not that it did it well, but like the new Napoleon, like I thought that did it well, right? Or
yeah, they didn't do the good historical research, it seemed like.
Yeah, Ridley Scott didn't care. Apparently, everyone was like, that was like a lot of people said it was just like a hit piece on Napoleon.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. They were trying to make Napoleon like the French Hitler.
Yeah.
Like, dude, this is what they did. Man.
Yeah,
you're really reaching. This is like they just threw away the lower class for wars.
It's I guess a lot of historians like tried to talk to him about it. He's like, Ridley Scott.
Even the color on the film was just so bland.
Yeah,
and like that time, like people were like, oh, black and white. Everything was black and white back in the day.
Yeah.
It's like no, there's vibrant colors. There's like this beautiful beauty to this, and it's like, nah, it's okay. He's French Hitler. It's like, it's like cool. All right, cool. Let's just really do the Corsican guy dirty, I guess.
Yeah, I know.
I really enjoy the Total War games.
Yeah,
I think those are like I think they get the order of it too well. Because like everything is such in perfect line formation.
Yes.
Like your units are always like super disciplined. They're marching wherever you tell them to.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, hey, you know what? This artillery is messing up my guys. Sacrificial cavalry charge. It's like they charge without question, without thinking. They just go and they'll die for the cause.
Right.
I think it's like a little bit taking away too much of the human aspect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they can break if the general dies. They have morale things. You can get your veteran
They try and
troops,
balance it,
so
but
your veterans don't flee as much.
If you play the games enough, you know how to game the system.
Right.
Okay.
Like,
I'm gonna keep my general safe. I'm gonna send out suicidal runs, take out their artillery pieces. Now my artillery is gonna have a free reign when their infantry moves in.
Yeah.
I've been playing this new game, Manor Lords. And I don't think it's...
Okay, so I've heard of that. I haven't played that yet.
It's essentially like a city management game with medieval time, but there is some combat where you can build out your retinue. You can you can hire your militia. The archers in there actually do a really good job. Like they're like these militia archers.
Yeah.
And they'll actually have a big wind up with their bows.
Okay.
So like you'll see them, like they'll have their bows, they'll knock up, and they'll wind up and shoot.
Okay.
So that's pretty cool. I think they did a good job there. That's like a small example though. And I like the idea because like medieval combat, we often think like these big battles.
Yeah.
Which even for if we look at like ancient history, like would probably be considered small. But I feel like a lot of medieval combat was like, all right, we're gonna go besiege this manor for like 2 years with like 100 guys.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, they got like 20 guys in there. We're just gonna siege them out, and it's gonna be like 2 years. The king said I can have your property because you weren't paying enough taxes.
Right.
Sorry, dude. I know you probably married to my sister, but it's business. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think Chivalry did a pretty good job, and then Chivalry 2 looks cool. I guess the way they had it spaced out, they had they had draw time in there, and they had strength requirements for the bows. I think that did a pretty good job as far as for the bows that went.
Yeah.
So that was I think a pretty good one. And then this is random. I promise this was not a purposeful segue.
Yeah.
But yeah, another really cool thing that's recently is I've been working with a game developer.
Oh.
And they sent me a 3D body scanner and everything. So they're developing a game, and not a plug. Again, this is just on the topic of gaming.
Don't plug them. They're not paying for this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they reached out to me because they're like, hey, we were trying to make this game and we want archery to be a really big part of it. And we saw your stuff and it's really cool. I was like, hey, thank you. And so basically, I like had some Zoom calls with them and everything, and they were kind of showing me the system of how it works. And like I was talking about the time to draw, the strength requirements, and they're actually gonna work. So I had the 3D scanner. They're gonna make me like an NPC in the game and everything like that.
I'm gonna play that game. I'm just gonna kill you.
That's
over
fine.
And over.
That's fair. Yeah.
I'll have you join my retinue, dude. Yeah.
And so that was a really cool thing because that was kind of like, I feel one really cool thing that's been happening. It's like with myself and you as well is like this understanding and this breaking of the idea of the skinny archer. Right?
I hate that trope.
And so that's just kind of been the overplayed trope, and it's like, all right, it takes strength, but I think people are starting to catch on a little bit, and these guys are like, hey, listen, we saw that it takes the time, so the way they're developing it, like, is if you have it at full draw, if you hold it for a certain time, there's a shake in the game, and it's like you have to have that strength requirement to have a certain type of bow to build up to it and everything. So it's like a really cool thing. Like, and this is like a small little thing. I think people have known. I think especially in England, obviously they already knew. But like when things came over to America with like D&D and different things, like the idea was wasn't.
Keep talking. I'm gonna grab some water.
Okay, there wasn't necessarily like a complete clear understanding of the requirement to use a bow because no one used heavy bows anymore. It basically gone out of vogue because there was gunpowder, and so when they wrote like the rules to D&D and different things like that, it started off as a dex-based weapon. And so that dexterity-based weapon kind of took the forefront of everyone's mind, I feel like, and that's kind of what a bow became, was like a dex-based weapon.
Yeah. I feel like dexterity is more important with like melee arms.
Yeah, 100%.
Whereas like a lot of strength and just intuitiveness is with the missile stuff. Like especially when it comes down to the warbow. Like the other stuff, like I feel like slinging's a lot very skill based.
Yes.
But you can use the inertia, the momentum. Like a crossbow is like very intuitive. Like you'll probably get really good with it.
Yeah.
But like the dexterity needed to wield and use swords and be on your feet and move and maneuver and get the angle. It's almost like being an MMA fighter with now weapons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one thing I've appreciated is breaking that down, because it's like Hollywood really did Antiquity dirty in that sense of like building these tropes out.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, dude, you got to like backtrack and reverse a lot of that maybe just wrong, like I don't know, school of thought.
Yeah. I mean, but the one thing is like, and the one thing that I definitely learned just from my short time over there is like, it's all about what shows well or what plays well, right? So it's like there's certain styles of slinging that are more historical. Yeah. But it's like, well, what's the flashiest kind of style we can get to make it still somewhat functional?
That's Showbiz.
Right? So it's like a lot of it is like what's going to look good on the camera. And so I think with movies and cinema and stuff, it's like that fast draw, rapid fire looks slick. It looks cool. Yeah. A heavy plotting draw and shot doesn't look as cool, you know? So
I mean, you just got to kind of educate and put that out into the zeitgeist. I think given it time and maybe in years to come, if like guys like you or I are talking about, or even like I'm on the smaller side, dealing mainly with firearms, but I love this topic.
Yeah.
You know, but guys like Todd or other, medieval YouTubers talking about that stuff, I think that'll help to kind of reshape the zeitgeist, where people are now going to start seeing those movies. Yeah. And they're going to essentially be like leaving bad reviews, where Hollywood's going to be like, ooh, my bad.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, maybe we should have done this more historically accurate. I think the demand, especially now how everyone's so connected, where it's like people are going to make, YouTube videos crapping on a director's work. They spend all this time making this movie just to get like this very key historical thing wrong. And people don't like that. Yeah. They may not, the director or whoever's producing may not care. They got their box office money. Yeah. But it's like still, it's like at the end of the day, like this stuff is important. This is like, people went through this. People like trained years to be good with this. And you're just essentially crapping on history. Yeah. I think it's a disservice. I do love that it's like we're kind of putting the message out. Yeah. it's a weird thing to die in a hill of like, hey, no, this archery stuff's actually pretty intense.
Well, you have mainly yours. You have the gun stuff. I'm mainly just like
of
archery's
course,
like how far. My thing is like how far can I stretch archery content on YouTube?
Dude, there's people love archery.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Yeah. But it's like thinking of like the different fun ideas of it and everything like that. It's just fun to brainstorm all that nonsense and goofiness.
There's something to be said about when you get into archery and you're learning to shoot or you're sinking your arrows into a target and you're hearing that thwap. You know, it's like, ooh, that is satisfying.
Yeah.
That is very. I've done a lot of gun stuff. I've shot. I shot anywhere from miniguns, down to small 22s. And it's like that stuff's a blast. But when I sink an arrow at distance into a target, I'm like, ooh, that's nice.
No, it's a clean sound, especially if the release is good. Just a straight shot and that deep, reverbing like thud. When it hits,
it's just nice.
Because
we're gonna go film later, but when I was talking to the guy who was letting us use his property, I was like, you want to shoot the crossbow? So he got on target, he sunk it, and he's like, "Oh, that was nice."
Yeah,
like he instantly fell in love. Kind of thing.
No,
there's something to it.
I'd love to see that thing in action. I mean, it's a decent trek for me to get here drive wise.
Yeah,
and I was like, when I saw the crossbow, I'm like, I would drive. I would drive hours to use and see this thing.
I do appreciate it coming out.
It is a piece of history. It's just something that is just. It's so unique. It's so, you can tell the way it's designed. It's just such a cool thing, and it's actually a weapon too. It's not a prop, And so to have one of those, it's just not like a modern crossbow. It's just so simple when you look at it, but just so like literally just like a 2x4. Yeah, it's kind of cut down a little bit.
Bit of a trigger mechanism. Yeah, and that's about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's something to be said, man. There's something really just cool about like capturing history like that. Yeah, and getting to show it off. Yeah. What day did I text you on? Did I text you on like a Thursday?
Yeah, it was recent. Yeah, just like
today's for context. Today's Monday. I was planning to film with this, and I was like, oh, you know who I would love to have out. I was like, hey, dude, it's super short notice. If you can swing it, if not, totally get it. And he's like, I'll be there. I'm like, oh my God.
Yes.
Like this was like Thursday when I texted him. And it's like, he lives in what? Can I say where you live?
Yeah.
Like up in Fresno?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like, and we're coming all the way out here to Arizona. So it's like an 8-hour drive.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that's impressive. All right, dude. Yeah, we're doing it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you taking the time to come out. Where can people find you?
So you can find me on YouTube, Rendar. I'm on Instagram, Garnish and Gains. For that one, I didn't use the same name. Across all platforms for some reason.
Huge mistake.
Yeah, honestly, that was a snafu. I'm on Facebook, but not the big profile. So a funny thing, there's actually a Facebook profile called Rendar. It's got like 100,000 followers. Yeah, and it's not me. It's just some spam account that keeps reusing my stuff.
Oh, nice.
And so you report them. Facebook doesn't care, right?
It's free. You're not getting any money from it, but I guess it's free marketing.
Exactly. Yeah. So mainly, let's say YouTube and Instagram. So YouTube Rendar, and then Instagram Garnish and Gains.
Dude, I appreciate you so much. You're one of my favorite people to work with and talk to, especially about this type of stuff. I love this stuff a bunch. So It's great to have you out, man.
It's great to be here. Thanks, man. I'm looking forward to it, and it's a pleasure, honestly. I'm excited.
Go check his stuff out. We're going to get out of here. I'll catch you guys on the flip.